Hey, everybody. It's so great to see you all. And this is such an important topic to talk about women's health and how each of us makes choices that are right for us in how we manage it. For those of you who know me, you know that I've had a crazy lifelong battle with healthcare struggles where I had cervical cancer when I was the mom of young daughters, had a hysterectomy, cancer cells started accelerating again a few years later, had to have a partial vaginectomy. So lots of stuff that's hard to talk about from a sensitivity standpoint. But back when I had all that going on, I really had the option of traditional healthcare or not much else. And I think since then, I've understood that not only getting the traditional healthcare support, but also doing what's right for my body in terms of exercising every day, what I eat and what I don't eat, has kept me healthier. And it's been me figuring it out for me. I'm really thrilled that we have two of our three speakers here with us, because unfortunately the third got sick. But between Dr. Nasha and Kayla Osterhoff, we have two women out of the Women's Health Organization who run a program called POWER. It's POWHER, focusing on women's health in the most holistic sense. So we've asked them to join us. Each will take about 15 minutes to talk about her journey to where she has gotten now. And then we'll really open it up to a conversation about how we can hack our own health and hack our own lives. So Nasha and Kayla, I'm so glad to welcome you both. And I will turn it over to the two of you. Welcome to Parlay House.
Thank you so much for having us. Nasha, would you like to begin?
Oh, sure. I'll totally. Thank you, everybody, for joining all of us here. I'm so excited to be part of your group today, and it's fun to see Kayla, my colleague, because we don't get to see each other often enough, and it's really great to meet a lot of new folks. I'm also recognizing some names and faces in this group, so I have a feeling I've run across you in other places, so wonderful to see you if we've met before. So my name is Nasha. I'm a naturopathic doctor. My specialty is in oncology, of all things, and people always ask me, well, how did you get into good old oncology? And I will tell you right from the get-go, similar to Anne, it's not like we wake up one day like, I think I'm going to work with cancer. That seems like a really fun topic to hang out in. But thanks to my own health issues, which I have a strong feeling everybody here in this room is here because of a personal health experience or someone very near and dear to them's health experience, I was no different. I had a lot of health issues as a young person. In fact, I don't even know if I ever really experienced health until probably the last good 10 or 15 years of my life. And so it's almost like you don't recognize how bad it is. It's like that little lobster, being put into cold water on the stovetop and the heat turned up underneath you. Slowly, you don't even quite realize it until it's completely gone. So for me, interestingly enough, with Anne's story, I was 14 when I had my first colposcopy for cervical cancer. It was very superficial. They were able to get it then. 2 years later, it recurred. They just kind of hacked away again, left me kind of a little bit of a nub of a cervix at that time. And that's how we dealt with this back in the 80s, right? That's how it was dealt with. And so lo and behold, everyone just kind of sent me on my way. So when I was in college, about 6 months, about the first few months of my sophomore year in college, I started having symptoms that were above and beyond what I was used to. So just to give a little more context, I had been diagnosed with IBS, I had been diagnosed with endometriosis, I had been diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome. It would take a few more years before I had the official diagnosis of celiac disease, rheumatoid arthritis, and Hashimoto's. Thought we'd have a little collection of those little events in our body. My mom recalls the doctor telling her when I was a little girl that it was normal for me to poop once a month because that was just my pattern. Okay, and it was also normal that I had cystic acne from basically head to toe all through my teen years, and they wanted to put me on more and more drugs, but I was very, very sick on whatever medications they threw at me. They thought it was normal to put me on birth control pills at 9 years old to start treating a little girl who started menstruating at 9. And so these are just some backgrounds of just to give you this idea of why it just became the normal place to be for me. So me ending up in and out of an ER for 6 months before my diagnosis, just a few weeks shy of my 20th birthday, everyone just treated me like a histrionic female. everyone just kept saying, oh, it's just your endometriosis. Oh, it's just your PCOS. Here's a script for an anxiolytic. Here's a script for another antibiotic. Oh, here's a script for an antifungal because the antibiotic just gave you a roaring yeast infection and UTI. I mean, it was just like one thing after another for many months. And it became excruciating pain, to the point where about 2 weeks before I ended up in the hospital, I couldn't eat without throwing it up. And I hadn't had a bowel movement in well over a month. So lo and behold, I show up in the hospital. A friend drives me there because I can no longer catch my breath. My abdomen is incredibly swollen. I just think it's poop buildup because I don't know better at this point. And arrive at the ER with a pulse ox in my 70s with imaging that showed, or lab work that showed end-stage organ failure. My liver and kidneys had completely shut down. My abdomen turned out to not just be the constipation, but also ascites, which is malignant fluid buildup outside of where fluid should be in your body. I had fluid built up in my abdomen, around my heart, and in my lungs. And at that point, finally, I had someone do a full exam as well as a scan in the ER that night. And they admitted me when they realized there was a mass on my right ovary. There were lesions in my liver. There were lesions all throughout my pelvis, all throughout my abdomen. And that's when they suspected, because they had to wait another several weeks for the results to come back. But I was diagnosed at that time with stage 4 terminal ovarian cancer. So there we are, nearly 30 years ago. The official diagnosis came in October 1991. And to be very, very transparent with all of you, it was my wake-up call. Because prior to that moment, my life, my experiences, probably my health and the way my psychology was working because of my health and my life experience, I didn't think I really belonged on this planet, and I didn't want to. And I actually tried to take my life on several occasions. And so for me, when I was actually told that I was going to die, that it was imminent, that I was within months of my own demise, it lit something in me. It lit a pilot light. And I had no expectation that I was going to cure this. I just want you all to know that. It wasn't an offering to even do so. There was, in 1991, there was no Dr. Google, there was no parlay. There was nothing out there to help educate, empower, inspire me. I was really on my own, to the point where I'd even been on a family fast for a while because of the toxicity of where I came from. So I was really alone and isolated, also uninsured, and in my sophomore year of college. So that process led me to just saying, if I'm going to die, I just want to understand why. I want to understand how I got to this point. So without any expectation, and so no attachment, so full equanimity, words I learned much later in my adulthood, I started to explore the why of how I ended up in that position. And it has been a 30-year journey, still learning that for myself and for the tens of thousands of patients I've had an honor to help them explore their why as well. So that's sort of my story in a nutshell. And everything in between is sort of just like the little fodder that fills the pages. But ultimately, that experience is what brings me here with all of you today.
That's amazing that you are willing to share all of that with us. And what a scary thing for a college student to go through. I'm so glad you're smiling and looking so healthy and with us now. Kayla, is your journey similar? Tell us about you.
Not similar. And I've heard Naisha's story several times, and every time it really just hits home and puts things into perspective. And it really just makes me so grateful that she's here with us and that I get to call her a friend and colleague. So thank you for sharing your story and being open and vulnerable. Mine is different. First of all, I'm a neuropsychophysiologist. And so what that means is it's a big, long, fancy term for studying the brain and the mind. So neuroscience and psychology is what I focus on. That's my area of specialty. And I'm currently in the dissertation process of my PhD. It's been a long educational road for me. But my training is varied across the health sciences. I started out in pre-physical therapy, headed to physical therapy school, and I worked in a physical therapy office as an assistant for several years during my undergrad. And during that time, I really saw how the healthcare system can be disempowering to some people, and especially the insurance model may limit access to certain healthcare offerings. And then I witnessed this firsthand when my mom had an opioid overdose. And this is when I found out, I was a junior year in my undergrad, and I had found out that my mom was an opioid addict. I had no idea that this was going on. This had been going on for several years before that, maybe 8 years. And our whole family had no idea until she almost died. That year, she overdosed 2 more times, had a stroke, and now she has permanent neurological damage from this. And this really had a huge impact on me and my career path, because the root cause of this addiction was the healthcare system that really failed her. One, because her doctors didn't take the time to understand her unique bio-individuality and her needs, and also coming from a trauma process that was not dealt with properly, and then prescribing opioids as the solution to several health issues that she was facing, which were really just masking these symptoms of what was going on with her, and obviously did not heal her. It really, to her detriment, ended up in an addiction, an overdose. So at that point, I switched gears and I went on to get my master's in public health instead, with the goal of working at the CDC. I wanted to work on the opioid epidemic. So after I finished my master's, I did go and work for CDC for several years as a health scientist, though I did not work on the opioid epidemic. I ended up working in global health. I got to work on all the major responses that happened over the past 7 years, starting with the Zika response. I worked on both Ebola responses, and then I worked just for a little while on the coronavirus response before I finally hung up my CDC hat to focus fully on women's health and all of the amazing things that we're doing together. And so that's where I find myself now. My personal health story is during this process of school and this family upheaval, I also ended up going through a divorce. And so with all of that stress, I was also working out very, very hard. I actually had made it all the way to Team USA in duathlon. And so just kind of burning the candle on all ends, stress with family, school, working full-time, training like a fiend. And lo and behold, I ended up with severe adrenal fatigue and burnout. And then when I went and did my laboratory tests, when I couldn't stay awake throughout a full day, I found out that I essentially had flatlined all of my hormones. And my doctor basically was looking at me and said, you have the hormones of an 80-year-old woman. And this is, we've got to do something about this before you go forward and end up with all kinds of issues in your future. And so that's when I really had to focus on my own health and bringing balance into my life and taking a more holistic view and approach for myself. And I'm really thankful for that, because I'm healthier and happier than I've ever been, and able to kind of really put into perspective what's really important to put my time and energy into.
That's an amazing story too. And, as it's as hard to talk about, issues related to the people you love as it is to talk about your own issues. So thank you. Similarly hard and moving story. So the two of you and Dasha, who couldn't be with us today, met each other and formed this program. Can you both tell us a little bit about what you're doing and why?
Go for it, Kayla.
Yes, absolutely. So the POWER program, all three of us work in women's health in a variety of areas. I'm focused on women's health science, Naisha in the actual healthcare practice side of things, and Dasha as a women's health coach. And so we came together and combined our forces to create a very holistic approach for women's health care. And our program is not necessarily healthcare, but what it does is empower women to learn about their bodies, essentially becoming their own health expert, and learning about their own bio-individuality and letting that be the driver and centerpiece for their healthcare decisions moving forward. So we all have a big passion for our own health exploration, health experimentation, finding out what works for us, what doesn't work for us. And this is really driven from something that we all see happening in the healthcare industry and in the sciences as well, which is women not represented in the health research. So because women are considered risky research subjects, and because we are biochemically, neurochemically, physiologically changing throughout the course of a month, typically, and over the life cycle, we are very difficult research subjects, meaning that you can't really control for all these changes that happen. So as a result, we are left out of the clinical research to a large degree. This is still going on. Interestingly, in 1977, the FDA actually banned women of childbearing potential, which is like, almost half of the population, from clinical research. And in the 90s, this was overturned by women's health activism, but the damage was done, and still to this day, women are not represented in the clinical research. So what that translates to is a lot of the recommendations, a lot of the medical and healthcare offerings, a lot of what insurance covers is geared towards men or postmenopausal women, leaving out a large chunk of the population who kind of is left to their own devices, or to take these recommendations that are not necessarily geared towards them and take a gamble, roll the dice, and hope that it works well for them. So this is something that we're addressing in our program, kind of twofold. So one is providing the women the education and the support and the knowledge for them to do their own health exploration, understand their own bio-individual needs, and make decisions based on their own health data. We're very big on our own learning about our health through health data, through the actual tangible metrics. So laboratory testing, biometrics, and things like that. And on the other end, we're trying to close this gap because we are doing women's health research with the first cohort of 30 women in our program that will launch early next year. And in this cohort, we are helping to build the evidence base for women's health science and help to close that gap, while also empowering women to be able to go out into the healthcare system, what is currently offered, navigate it, and make the best choices for themselves.
That's a lot. Naisha, do you want to add anything to that?
Or just to give you what POWER stands for, to just kind of drive everything that Kayla said home, it's personalization of women's health, evidence, and research. And I've loved watching the comments that are showing up in the chat here. Well, one of the other areas, like I think it was, first I'm going to say her name, Adamika. What a gorgeous name, by the way. I love that she talked about just the importance of looking at health equality and healthcare disparities in women's health in general. Definitely at the top of our list. Sexual, reproductive, maternal health, really, really an issue with regards to, underserved, indigenous, socioeconomic backgrounds, and, skin color backgrounds. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I see this every day just in my own practice with working with women of color in my oncology world. And there's such a difference of how you address someone of African descent or Asian descent or Anglo descent with regards to their risk factors that is just not talked about. We put everybody in the same bucket and expect that they're going to have the same response and the same outcomes. And I am incredibly fascinated with the biochemical, epigenetic, hereditary individuality that drives our underpinning propensities towards disease, but also what is it going to take to bring us back into balance. And those things are just, there's no room in our current medical system to do the N of one that is so required to handle this and handle this well. So yes, all of the things that that are being brought up in the chat, that is exactly what we're on fire about, because it doesn't exist. So instead of us waiting for it, that's what Kayla was waiting for, I was waiting for, Dasha, we're like, well, geez, I guess we might as well go and create it. So that's really what it came down to. And I've always, in my role in this, like I said, I'm the living laboratory, I'm the investigator. I want to explore the why of things, because if I understand where and why, then I have a better sense of where we are and where we need to go. Very simple, very simple. So I want people to have that type of awareness of themselves, which creates that empowerment and then creates the roadmap to whatever their choices are, whatever their goals are. And it's so much fun to be with, Dasha and Kayla and I are also working very diligently to get away from the term biohacker, because it's such a masculine, young, destructive, like somehow attack, and this is, we're trying to really shift this concept. Like, we're so good at attacking the the anti-drug, the anti-cancer, the antibiotic, the antidepressant. We're like, okay, what are we being for something? How about for health, for awareness, for vitality, to even understand that our disease processes are simply messages to let us know where we, that we need to listen and that we need to change course in a lot of different areas in our lives. Like for Kayla, and her experience was such a powerful one that her life experience even led her to what I often call the husbandectomy process. It's like the relation, it's like you have to look at even those elements. We are putting that type of data into our data collection system that we're doing for this one-year program. So it's taking into account a lot of the subjective as well as the objective metrics going in. So we're very excited.
I know that the pharmaceutical world is focused heavily on evolving to personalized medicine, so that if you have cancer and need chemo, they will know for you which of the available options is most likely to work. When you talk about bio-individuality, do you mean something similar? And how do you go about that? And how do we go about evaluating our unique systems and what works for us?
Well, I'll start and then have Kayla jump on this. When we talk about precision medicine and cancer specifically, we are going very myopic, and we are looking at a tumor or a tumor cell, and we're looking at its expression at that level. But we keep trying to treat cancer and other chronic illnesses in this same way. It's like, here's the one target, here's the one cause, here's the one treatment. We've been doing that experiment for over 70 years, and it's not getting us very far. Now, the cool thing is it's sexy and it's exciting to see all this cool testing, blood biopsies and tissue biopsies and everything coming out, but they aren't changing outcomes at all. And the reason is because they forget that it's what those cells and what that tumor is swimming in, the terrain. Okay, it's what they call the micro environment, or the extracellular matrix, or the cytoplasm, or just the goo, within your cells that everything's suspended in, and then what I like to call the terrain. And so whatever way you like to qualify that, we are not giving that part of us much credence, I suppose. And so that's where we need to take that next step of saying, okay, well, we can look at that target, that information that we're taking in, but we still need to decide what we're going to do with that information. And we need to decide what it's actually telling us. And we need to interpret it for the patient and help the patient understand what patterns in their life led to the expression of that particular target, that then allows us to move forward in a much more powerful way to change an outcome.
So can you give me some specific examples of what that might mean with the women that you're working with? Because that was theoretical. So how does it apply on a day-to-day?
Well, I wish Dasha was here, because she is a perfect example of this, but I think she'd give me permission to tell this story.
Yeah.
So she, part of her story that brought her here is, of course, her own health issues. She's had some traumatic brain injuries that really changed her perspective on health and well-being, another area that's very underserved and very not understood. So she has that passion, but she also comes from a family, her mother had breast cancer. And she's come from that background as well and watched, just like how that sort of took over her whole household. Well, she started getting curious about her own biohacking from her head injury experience and from her mother's cancer experience, and kind of jumped into the bandwagon of what was available out there to her in the world. It's like, oh, to do this, you take these supplements for this thing to prevent this situation. So when she and I started to come together to weave together our program, I was practicing with her on her own labs to give her examples of what we may be seeing. And it was a huge aha when we got back her hormone metabolic panel. She'd been on all the right things, the DIM and the indole-3 carbinol and the cruciferous vegetables and all the things to go after how our body metabolizes estrogen. But when we got back her hormone panel, she had no issues there at all. But she had loads of the toxic estrogens, the 4-hydroxyestrogens built up in her system, that things like DIM and indole-3 carbinol don't touch at all. She also had problems with her melatonin. So her HPA axis and her circadian rhythm was really wonky, and her adrenals were basically flatlined, similar to Kayla's story right here. And so she was trying to treat an estrogen problem that didn't have an estrogen problem, because she was following the sheep in the herd of what everyone's like, oh, this is what you do to prevent cancer, or what you do to prevent whatever condition. And so she'd been throwing things at it for years and thought she was making headway until we really unveiled what was very specifically happening for her. And when she started to make some subtle changes there, it was night and day of things she'd spent a decade or longer on trying to correct were corrected in a matter of weeks.
So what did she do? What were some of the solutions for her?
So a couple things that stand out is we actually really got into her detoxification. We looked at her epigenetics next, her SNPs, her single nucleotide polymorphisms. This is basically the blueprint we're all born with. Okay, and so I can look at that and go, okay, this means that you don't process certain foods or chemicals or hormones or whatever in certain ways. And these show your strengths and these show your weaknesses. So for her, a couple specific examples was just her circadian rhythm. We started to work with that. So for instance, like morning, she does really well with her brain history, and she'd had an intuitive feeling of this, of using lion's mane, for instance, but now she was taking it more at a therapeutic level. It was so good for her HPA axis, for her circadian rhythm, and for her TBI recovery, that we were really upping her dose. She was taking like, I don't know, 250 milligrams, and she needed to be taking 2 grams a day to get the therapeutic effect. So even her taking the right thing, but not the right amount, was interesting. We were also trying to reset her, get her with a brain injury pattern. We need to keep someone on a very focused regimen, a routine. The brain needs that routine to heal. And she had been going through a lot of things that were keeping her out of routine, from time zones to house full of roommates to trying to be everything to everyone and all the things. And so we started to really change her lifestyle routine. And then specifically for hormones for her, it wasn't about treating her hormones, it's about helping her detoxify the toxic buildup of these exogenous hormones coming from the environment that her body just happens to store, like chipmunks storing up nuts for the winter. She just had a tendency towards that. So she could have spent her whole life doing all the right things to prevent breast cancer and then been shocked 10 years down the road when it showed up for her, because she was never addressing the correct hormone imbalance that was happening for her body. So I'm excited. We're getting ready to retest. It's been 6 months we talked. We're getting ready to do a lot of retesting for her to see where she is, but it's quantifiable on her CGM, it's quantifiable on all of her wearable HRV. It's already starting to show up in her labs that she's improving her HPA axis, her thyroid and adrenals. So it's been really cool to watch her just feeling it, but having a few little clues. But we're getting ready to take a look at a deeper dive of how her hormonal Dutch hormone metabolites look here. So that's a pretty long story to give for there, but it's so intricate, and it doesn't have to be, it was an hour conversation we had, and me glancing through a few things. And what she and Kayla and I are working on is partnering with a lab and partnering with a database that takes all of this information in real time and allows us to make quicker interpretations much faster, in a way that we can actually scale this and make it usable. Because you can just imagine, especially if any of you are doctors or healthcare providers, you can't do what I just did in a 7-minute office visit.
Right. Right.
And what happens a lot in the functional medicine world is everyone gets on protocols. Everyone's like, I'm going to go to the PCOS protocol lady, or I'm going to go to the endometriosis protocol lady, or the IBS protocol person, or we go to those folks and they give us a protocol. And so even though it might be functional medicine and natural medicine, it's still no different than standard of care medicine, in my opinion, because it's still putting people on protocols without really diving in deeper and unearthing the intricacies and the N of one of that individual.
So you're doing this at a super deep and detailed level. I think I understood maybe half of the acronyms that you are using, and I'm pretty well informed by this. So what I want to do is bring it down to some basics. I think we have some experts on this call. We also have people who are just starting to think about small steps that they can take to start to improve their own health. So and I don't know which of you wants to take the lead here, but I think it would be great if you could, for those of us who haven't started adjusting anything from what we eat and how we exercise and what we do, how we adjust foods, tell us the 101. How do we start on a basic level?
Go for it, Kayla.
I can kick off. So a centerpiece of our program, like Naisha was talking about, is this laboratory testing. And really what this is looking at our own data, our own health data, to start to understand and bring awareness to what's going on here with us. This one person, an N of one, meaning self-experimentation, right? So for anyone, whether they take our program or not, it really has to start with increasing your self-awareness. One of the very first steps that should be taken by any woman is to start to track your cycle, if you're not already doing that, to understand what phase of your cycle you're in and how your body kind of changes throughout the course of a month, or whether you're in perimenopause, or menopause or postmenopause, but understanding how your body reacts to the environment around you. So this can be done as simply as taking a journal. This can be done by wearing a wearable, like a bio strap. This is what this is. There's the Fitbit, there's the Fitness Pal, there's all kinds of wearables out there that you can just simply wear on your wrist, and it's going to feed you back information about your own body and what's going on in it. When you start to have some level of information about your own health status, how your body is reacting to the environment around you, then you can start to look at the different things that you're engaging in with your health and how they impact you. For instance, let's say that you want to do something really simple like optimize your sleep schedule, your circadian rhythm, right? So what you could do is, if you don't want to get a wearable, you could simply write down when you go to sleep, the time that you go to sleep, what your bedtime routine is, the time that you wake up, what your morning routine is, and how you feel. Start to track that over several days, and you can see how adjusting, so maybe you adjust your sleep schedule up or back a little bit. See how that impacts you. Do you feel less brain fog during the day, or do you feel more brain fog during the day? Do you have better energy or less energy? Do you have a better mood or a lower mood throughout the day? So something as simple as that could be the starting point. And so with our program, we take this and put it on steroids, and and we go in and
figurative, not literal steroids.
Not literal, not literal steroids. We put the concept on steroids. And so what we do is we're working with women for an entire year. We're providing them with a master's level education in the health science aspect of it, the women's health science. We're providing them with products, cutting edge leading products in women's health and femme tech, to be able to do this self-experimentation, this self-exploration, and start to collect their data. And we are lab testing them comprehensively. All the lab tests that Naisha mentioned that we did with Dasha, we're doing with all the women 3 times throughout the year, so that they can get a baseline, check in how they're doing halfway, check in how they're doing at the end, and see how these little self-experiments and little transitions that they've made with their health are actually impacting their data, to see if it's working, what's not working. So this is a biofeedback system, essentially, that also includes the health coaching, which is, I wish Dasha was here, but she is the health coaching role. So she is actually the one-on-one direct support system with each and every woman to make sure that they are understanding what their labs are telling them, that they are understanding the education aspect that they are getting, and that they're able to feel like they could take this information and put it into action. Because so many programs out there just throw a ton of information, and then you kind of sit there like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Well, this is more of a stepwise, very specific approach that will look at, okay, here's what's going on with me. Here's what I do about it. Is it working? Yes or no? Adjust. Is it working? Yes or no? And this is a more impactful, more useful model for healthcare.
That's great. So for, we have women around the world on the call right now. If they want to start to do some of what you're doing, but you obviously are, you have a limited capacity as you're just kicking this off. What teams, experts should they have in place?
Awesome question. Such a good question. Now, first of all, you're going to want to pull together a team of someone who can actually order labs for you. What we're creating right now in the United States, well, and actually North America, is a kit that can be sent to, that is with a lab that we've partnered with. By early 2022, we may actually have our global impact. We are working towards having the ability to send these kits overseas as well, which is excellent, because that also then eliminates the middleman of trying to find a physician who's willing to order this for you. Again, those labs are also part of this program. So if you did have to go outside of our program to order those labs, currently you'd have to pay, it's upwards of about $10,000 worth of lab testing over that year. So It's part of the program that we're bringing on board here. So there's that piece, as if you had ongoing or you didn't choose to do this program, you'd want to work with someone who can help you order the proper labs to do that deep dive. The 6 main areas we look at, just so you're starting to think about this, we spend the first 2 months on just women's hormone health and balancing, basically from menarche to menopause and beyond, and whether menopause was medically induced or natural, et cetera. We cover all the topics that fall within that arena. Then we move into women's circadian biology, which is for a 2-month period of that year. Into the next 2 months, we go into stress and stress management. And then we go a deeper dive into educating them. Now they've seen their labs twice. By the time we reach this point, we actually go into helping them really understand, be able to interpret their own labs. So when they leave that year program, they are pros at doing their own evaluations. And then we move into the women's neuropsychology component, and we finalize our 1-year program with women's functional nutrition and fitness. And you'll notice most women's programs today start with those 2 areas, the fitness and the diet, because they tend to be the tangible. And really most women, we did a really cool, we did a 6-part program called Power Hour, which was actually more like Power Hour and a half, but we just completed this, which gives like little tasters of what we're talking about here. And we did give a lot of low-hanging fruit tangibles. So for folks who want to go and explore that right now, maybe we can get that link into your chat box here. But that's where we start to show women examples of what that year-long program looks like in a matter of 6 weeks of these little hour-and-a-half discussions, so they can start to evaluate their own environment, start to take personal audits of their bodies, of their living environments, of their communities and beyond. That gives you a head start. You don't have to wait till we kick this off in January, that maybe already starts to show your own blind spots. And so those are just some examples of what we start to look at for folks here, that you get curious of where you're out of balance, and people start to realize, like, one of the coolest things in the fitness piece, like we were kind of breaking down, of women of a certain age have more of a desire to have a physical, like they want to look good on the outside. And then you reach a certain point where you want to feel better on the inside. And then you reach a different point, like it changes, your desires change at different phases of your womanhood as well, through seasons of our life. And so we really speak to that as well. And so we put food and diet, or food and fitness, at the end, because you can't even have food and fitness land well in a broken physiology and a broken psychology. And so the journey we really take women.
So in these different regions of the world where our folks are, if they want to just start having a partner who's willing to look holistically at what's going on with them, what sort of person would they be and where are they likely to find them?
So you probably would start with, because functional medicine physicians do now inhabit the planet, that would probably be a reasonable thing. But I caution you that many functional physicians are very trained in protocols. So you want to find a partner who you say, I just want a partner to help me explore. I'm not ready to treat yet. I want to start to just explore what's here. And then we can start talking about treatment. So that would be my sort of vetting process with that practitioner. If you live in North America, a naturopathic physician has that type of training. Yes, there are naturopaths all over the world, but the training is very different outside of North America. We have the same type of training as conventional medical doctors. So we have much more rigorous in our medical sciences. And I mean, I can deliver babies and prescribe drugs and do surgery and all the things, although it's not what I do anymore. But just to give an example there, and also there are a growing number of functional medicine coaches that I think are getting some pretty good foundational education to be able to start the curiosity journey with you. So those do, cover the world. Kayla, who else would you add to that mix?
I would definitely say getting a health advocate, somebody like a coach who can not only support you and give you resources. A coach is usually pretty helpful to get you connected with the right folks who you need on your health journey. But they can also give you really great resources of, labs that you can get done at home without a doctor's order, or where you can get some education or information. So I would definitely get a teammate, a health advocate, and some sort of coach that can really support you throughout the process and also keep you accountable, because that's always helpful for everyone.
I like that.
One of our members, Tracy Abbott, just started an acupuncture clinic. And so I think she suggests acupuncturists are another good source. She also asks a question, and I don't even know what it means. She asks where you put TCM, I don't know what TCM is, and herbs in your treatment protocol.
So Tracy, I'm actually a DOM as well. And I spent 13 years studying Ayurveda. And so I think my gift and my strength is because of those ancient healing modalities. I think that they are incredible at seeing patterns, way more than naturopathy and functional medicine, and way more than osteopathy and medical conventional medicine. So I'm very much lean heavily on my roots, my Asian, Eastern Asian roots. So I love it, and it plays a very big role both in physical treatment, the actual needles and moxa and cupping and gua sha and tui na and qigong and all my favorite little things of the actual hands-on treatments that Chinese medicine. But the Chinese medicine also offers a worldview and a methodology and an understanding of the body more as a whole dynamic interactive organism, which is just so elegant and missing in many of our more modern integrative or alternative medicine systems. So yes, absolutely. There's a big role for it. And the other side is, when I went through my acupuncture training, when I went through my program, I also saw the limitations that they really weren't given a good education of laboratory evaluation. It's pretty low hanging fruit, because I train a lot of doctors now, including acupuncturists, on integrative oncology, and I see their limitations in some areas. So I really like the collaborative team approach, which is really fun. But we definitely don't want to forget our ancient medical wisdom. It's out there and incredibly effective. I mean, that really, to me, were the original biohackers, the Ayurvedic physicians, the acupuncturists, the naturopathic doctors. They saw our relationship to nature on the outside of us and how it relates to the inside of us.
Yes.
I have a question. There are a lot of highly trained professionals like the two of you, and then there are a lot of people who might not be the ones to trust. Are there any rating systems, reference lists? Like, how do people know if the person because we don't know a lot, right? We're not like you guys that we're deep into it and someone can say something and we're like, no, you don't know your we don't know. We just have to accept it. So how do we evaluate as mere mortals?
I don't know.
Yeah, I would say, like, with the health coaching world, it's kind of like the wild, wild west out there. There really is not a good framework around licensure, scope, practice. I know several health coaches out there, and everybody's working in it within a different scope and area of expertise. So unfortunately, there's not a rating system other than like word of mouth, I would say is the best case scenario. Go to somebody somebody else that you know and love and trust is raving about. That's probably your best case scenario. And then test drive your coach. Don't pay for a coach unless they're willing to get on a call with you, for an hour, get to know you and see if you vibe with that person. If you don't, then you're automatically in for trouble. So I would say, test drive them, use recommendations from your friends. And then Naisha can speak more to like the medical system and the different kinds of doctors that are out there.
Actually, those 2 points are so critical, what you just said, like the word of mouth is very big. And then the test driving, you should test drive your standard of care providers, your naturopathic providers, you can definitely interview them as well. That's what I recommend folks do, because we're not meant to resonate with everybody. And to me, the relationship, the rapport and the relationship with the practitioner is just as critical to the healing process as any therapy we're going to give. And so if you don't, it's just not happening. It's just never going to happen, so that's really important. The other thing is, I think just come in with your own set of questions, be really clear. And I want, that's where I would come in and say, perhaps, how do you decide what's best for me? Like, how would you ask the person, what is your process of evaluating me as a whole person, taking into account all parts of my being? What is your methodology before you start to even put me on any treatment plan? If they give you a blank stare or they don't have an answer for that, that would be a really good clue to be like, okay, they already have their $40,000 program. They've got, I just went through this with a patient online that I saw her responding on a Facebook forum talking about this $40,000 program she was going to do. And it brought my name in because the person said they trained with me and I didn't know the person or their clinic. And I'm like, I knew by the way she described it, that person absolutely did not train with me. So I sent her a private message and just said, would like you, first of all, I don't know that person. So I'm just going to be very honest there. And second of all, I just want you to go back to them and tell me, how did they evaluate you for this $40,000 program? What was the mechanisms that led up to deciding if that particular collection of treatments for a woman who's dealing with stage 3 breast cancer? It's not like she's like dealing with a tennis elbow. This is just crazy. And it was great. I got an email the next day and she basically fired the person and is moving on. And so it's like she just knew. So now she has that set of her own questions and vetting to ask. And so that's very helpful. No matter what type of condition you're dealing with, you want to be treated as a whole person. And if you are a person of of a particular age and your seasons of womanhood, or you're a person of a particular genetic background, or a person of color, you need to also ask the questions of what is your experience with working with X, Y, and Z, so you feel comfortable that they know what they're doing with you as well.
What do you do about the majority of them who have a huge fee before they'll spend an hour with you? Do you just say, forget it? I'm not willing to pay a huge fee without.
Yeah, that's a good question, because when I was finishing up my consulting directly with patients, I had a huge fee that they had to pay to get in to see me, but I had outcomes and I had thousands of stories of people, testimonials, experiences, people referring in, people seeing my story, people seeing the outcomes of my patients, so there was, I guess, proof in the pudding of what was out there with my piece. So if you have someone, you want to make sure they can back up that data. For me, we did it that way because I demand a lot of the patients I was consulting with. And so it would be really devastating for me when a patient would show up to our hour consult together without all the materials needed to help them. I don't know if they just expect me to have a crystal magic ball, but I would spend 6 to 7 hours preparing for a consultation. And if I didn't have all the data, then no one wins.
So how do they test drive someone like you if they don't know you? How do they do that?
Most of my colleagues that are newer and don't have the following or people understand who they are will have an offering of a 15-minute, or even have a testimony, like a patient that's willing to talk to. I actually do still have a lot of patients who are like, I'm happy to talk to anybody who has questions about my experience. We get that all the time. Like now at this point, I'm, where people talk about us in a lot of different places out there. So we have proof, I suppose, but that would be one thing. If they're kind of somebody who's newer or doesn't have a big following or hasn't been at it for 30 years, ask for who could I talk to that you've worked with that could share their experience.
I think there are two ways to test drive. Speaking to that, Naisha, one is an indirect test drive, which is if it is the best of the best out there, of course, they're going to have a huge fee. These people are solidified in their practice and they are very well known. Find out where they are, find out where their videos are, watch their YouTube, listen to their podcast episodes, and see if you resonate with that person. That's how you can test drive people who are, well established in their career and are likely well worth the money. And then for other people who are less established, if you can't find anything where you can connect with them, watch them in a video, listen to them in a podcast, watch an interview, see them in a documentary, whatever, and they are not willing to then offer some way for you to connect with them or a way for you to connect with one of their previous patients, then I would be wary about spending the money. And then for coaches, in my opinion, there's no excuse why a health coach would not meet with you to see if the vibe is right, because that's the whole point of the practice, is to connect with you one-on-one, be your support system, be your advocate, and really kind of be your friend and that frontline connection. So if they're not willing to spend 15 minutes to see if you're the right fit, then I would not necessarily think that they would be the best choice for a coach to really support you.
Would I be correct in assuming that what you guys do is not covered by most traditional insurance?
A lot of the labs, a lot of the basic blood labs can be, but a lot of what they call the esoteric or the provocative testing, like your hormone metabolites and your heavy metal tests and your glyphosate tests and your epigenetic hiccups, those aren't. And those are the pricier ones, typically. And unfortunately, the model, we really are a disease-based management model of healthcare. And so a lot of what we're trying to do in our group of 30, the women we've got, again, sort of like this group, people from, just curious to want to explore their health, to people who are really, really sick, dealing with some really severe health issues and everything in between. What they're finding is they're not getting help from typically their insurance covered traditional medical systems. And so they're realizing they have to leave that sandbox. The main driver of why Kayla and Dash and I are doing this is we really want to change that. We want this to be available to everybody. It should be standard of care. And we're using good, sound data and science to back it. We're not being esoteric, woo-woo, hippie chicks. I mean, it really is something. We're a bunch of science geeks ourselves, but we also recognize our humanity in the process. And it's really frustrating when we're up against a medical system. It kind of keeps us boxed in and locked in, and keeps a socioeconomic exclusion of so many people that need this medicine. And so one of our hopes is offshoots of this after the first year is to start getting full funding for the program from a different environment, like maybe a funding for, underserved communities, so like on the Navajo Nation or something, or different places. I'm just trying to think of all the different places that I've worked already and looked at these types of models. We have to basically do proof of concept first before anyone wants to give us money to fund it. That's what we're hoping for.
And in the end, we hope to kind of work ourselves out of a job, meaning that this becomes standard of care, that you go to your doctor and this is the type of care that you get, making us in our program obsolete. That would be my dream.
That's
wow,
amazing.
I love it.
Ariel, do you have one quick final question and we got to wrap up?
Yeah, I know we're off. I just wanted to add really more just to say, I know one thing that Dasha mentioned that was so great about what you're doing, and specifically you, Naisha, is you go around, you spend a lot of time working with traditional, standard healthcare practitioners, whether they're GPs or specialists, teaching them, these different tools to add to their toolbox when helping their patients. So that intention to get this care out there really is there. And I think it's amazing. Last question I'll just ask, hopefully you can answer it quickly, is just the advocacy part. I think this is so intimidating. I was with the doctor this morning, and for my foot, for a tiny thing, he's like, great, we're going to give you a shot of this steroid, da, 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 da. And I just was like, oh, I should say something. I should ask about this, but I froze, honestly, and I got the shot and now my foot hurts. And so
I'm sorry.
how do we like, is there like one phrase or like sentence that we can just say like, I don't know what that means. Can you explain it? Or like, what can we do to stand up for ourselves?
First, I love that. Just like, wow, can you explain why or what the reason is for this? I think that's number one. Number two, maybe like, I'd really like to do a little research before I let you do this. Can I get back? Can I come back in for another appointment to do that? I think that that often is exactly what happens, Ariel, is we're in our visit and suddenly you're like on the assembly line and you can't get off. It's really difficult for everything from a simple, like, oh, quick, here's a biopsy, when you're like, wait a minute, I just came in for a mammogram and now you're poking holes in my boob without me even knowing what's going on, or a shot in the foot for something that you might have wanted to do some research. So I love that of just like, wait a second, can you explain to me why we're doing this? Or let me go home and think about it, do some research, and then I'll make another appointment.
And you can even ask them to provide you with the research as well, because they have all of that stuff and they could easily email you all the studies and everything and the information on the drug. So that's a really good way to keep them accountable as well.
Yeah.
Great. Well, this has been so fascinating, so interesting. You guys are really bright, and I love how passionate you are about making each of us our best selves inside and out. So thank you so much for that. And I know that there have been a lot of questions that have not gotten answered. So we will provide all of your information in our follow-up to our members and allow everybody to pursue their own health as they see fit. But so much to think about. And I love everything about how you're thinking about all of us. And I hope that we can accelerate this so that everybody, whether you can afford it now or not, will soon have access to holistic care. Thank you both so, so much. We send healing wishes to Dasha, and let's all dance out together. And team, we'll see you next week on Parlay House for yet another way to be community.
Thank you.
All right, let's hit it.